Few would deny that Goodfellas has become a classic, and Martin Scorsese, in making it, arguably produced the ultimate gangster picture, setting a cinematic bar few have reached. But Goodfellas is far more than just a mob movie. It is a scathing, darkly humorous satire of the American dream, a rise and fall story, a tragedy, and a razor sharp comedy, all rolled into one. Scorsese's mastery lies in his ability to immerse the audience in a world that is simultaneously glamorous and horrifying, thrilling and terrifying. The film's power comes not just from the story itself, but from the almost documentary level realism that underpins every scene. One of the aspects of Goodfellas that has elevated the film to its iconic status is the intense realism of its depiction of life in the Mafia. Unlike films such as The Godfather or Once Upon a Time in America, which often romanticize organized crime, Goodfellas is grounded in the truth. The story is based on real events and real people, chronicled in Nicholas Pileggi's 1986 nonfiction bestseller Wiseguy. The book details the life of Lucchese crime family associate Henry Hill, his close associates including James Jimmy, the Gent Burke, and Thomas DeSimone, and their involvement in one of the most daring heists in American history, the Lufthansa heist. This robbery, carried out in 1978, was the largest ever committed on U.S. soil at the time. 11 mobsters, mostly associates of the Lucchese family, stole $5.875 million in cash and jewels from a vault at John F. Kennedy International Airport, a sum equivalent to over $20 million today. The audacity of the heist and the cold blooded efficiency with which it was executed shocked the nation and cemented these men as legends in organized crime. Brooklyn in the 1960s and 70s. To fully understand the world of Goodfellas, it's essential to understand the environment in which these men grew up and operated. Brooklyn during the mid 20th century was a mosaic of ethnic neighborhoods, each with its own tight knit community. Brownsville, where Henry Hill was born, was a working class neighborhood dominated by Jewish and Italian families. Many young men there were drawn into organized crime not just for money, but as a means of social mobility, protection, and respect. The Mafia was woven into the fabric of daily life. Local businesses, unions, and even law enforcement were often under its influence, creating an ecosystem where criminal activity was normalized. For kids like Henry Hill, James Burke, and Thomas DeSimone, the Mafia wasn't just a career, it was a lifestyle and a symbol of identity. Respect, loyalty, and fear were the currency of this world, and children were socialized to understand this hierarchy from a very young age. Henry Hill, the central character in Goodfellas, was born in 1943 in Brooklyn, New York, to an Irish American father and a Sicilian American mother. Growing up in Brownsville, Hill idolized the mobsters around him from a very young age. By 14, he had dropped out of school entirely to begin working for Paul Vario, a capo in the Lucchese crime family. His early tasks were small, picking up money from local rackets and delivering it to his boss. But Hill quickly moved up the criminal ladder. He began participating in increasingly serious crimes: arson, assault, and credit card fraud. After a brief stint in the military in the early 1960s, Hill returned to the streets, fully immersed in a life of crime. Although his Irish heritage prevented him from becoming a made man, Hill became a highly active and influential associate of the Lucchese family. Among Hill's closest companions was James Burke, a fellow associate of Vario's crew. Together, they orchestrated the Lufthansa heist, executed truck hijackings, committed extortion, and engaged in other criminal enterprises. Hill also ran a major narcotics operation, trafficking marijuana, cocaine, heroin, and quaaludes on a wholesale level. Hill's downfall came in 1980 when he was arrested on drug trafficking charges. Initially, he resisted cooperating with authorities. However, fearing for his life after learning that some of his associates might kill him to prevent him from incriminating them, Hill decided to testify. His cooperation led to the arrests of many key figures in the Lucchese family, and provided the basis for Wiseguy, which in turn inspired Goodfellas. After testifying, Hill entered the witness protection program with his wife, Karen, and their children. Although he repeatedly revealed his true identity and was eventually removed from the program, Hill survived the deadly world he had inhabited for decades. He died of complications from heart disease on June 12, 2012, one day after his 69th birthday. James Burke, portrayed by Robert De Niro as Jimmy Conway, was born in 1931 in New York to an Irish immigrant mother. Burke's early life was marked by trauma and instability. He was shuffled through foster homes and orphanages, suffering both physical and sexual abuse. One particularly harrowing incident involved a foster father who died in a car crash after attempting to punish the young Burke. The trauma of this event shaped him profoundly. Burke's Irish heritage barred him from becoming a made man in the Italian-dominated Mafia, but by the 1950s, he had established himself as a formidable figure in the criminal underworld of South Ozone Park and East New York. He earned the nickname Jimmy the Gent for tipping truck drivers after hijackings, a sign of both his charm and cunning. However, Burke's reputation for extreme violence often overshadowed his charisma. In 1962, he brutally murdered his fiancee's ex-boyfriend on their wedding day, dismembering the man in his car. Burke masterminded the Lufthansa heist and allegedly ordered the killings of most of the men involved afterward to prevent anyone from implicating him. After Henry Hill's testimony in 1982, Burke was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his involvement in a Boston College basketball point shaving scandal. While incarcerated, he was convicted of an earlier murder and sentenced to life in prison. He died of lung cancer in 1996. Karen Hill, born Karen Friedman in 1946, met Henry Hill through mutual friends while working at a dental office. Their courtship was turbulent. Henry stood her up on their second date, and she initially considered their first encounters disastrous. Eventually, however, Henry won her over, and the couple eloped in 1965 when she was just 19. They later held a large Jewish ceremony to satisfy her family. The Hills had two children, Greg and Gina, and initially lived with Karen's parents. As Henry rose in Vario's crew, they moved into their own home. Karen's life became increasingly difficult as Henry's criminal activities escalated. When Henry faced prison on drug charges in 1980, he testified against his associates and entered the witness protection program, taking Karen and their children with him. Their marriage eventually ended in divorce, finalized in 2001. Karen remarried later, living under an alias to maintain privacy after the widespread exposure from Wiseguy and Goodfellas. Thomas DeSimone, known in the film as Tommy DeVito, was infamous for his violent temper and psychopathic tendencies. Standing 6 feet 2 inches and weighing 225 pounds, DeSimone joined Vario's crew in 1965 and reportedly committed his first murder at the age of 17. According to Henry Hill, DeSimone was a pure psychopath, driven both by ambition and a desire to uphold his family's reputation. DeSimone's most notorious crimes included the murder of William Billy Bats Benvena and Parnell Stacks Edwards. During the Lufthansa heist, he was one of the key gunmen responsible for securing the money. In 1979, almost a year after the heist, DeSimone was murdered, likely by the Gambino family, after violating Mafia codes and attempting to rape Karen Hill, who was both Vario's mistress and Henry's wife. Paul Vario, depicted as Paul Cicero in Goodfellas, was born in 1914 in New York City. A towering man at 6 feet 3 inches, Vario became a made man and eventually led his own crew in the Lucchese family. He wielded influence through extortion, union manipulation, and outright violence. Vario approved the Lufthansa heist and oversaw much of the criminal activity in East New York, controlling rackets around the airport that were a major source of income. Vario was notorious for his ruthlessness. For For instance, when a waiter accidentally spilled wine on his wife, Vario sent men to beat the restaurant staff with baseball bats later that night. Eventually, Vario was arrested due to Henry Hill's testimony, specifically for defrauding the government through a phony job scheme intended to secure Hill's release from prison. Vario died of a heart attack in prison in 1988. Billy Batts, a made man in the Gambino family, was born in 1921 in Brooklyn. Unlike Henry Hill, his Italian heritage allowed him to become a full member of the Mafia. By 1961, Batts was a made man and a street soldier under John Gotti. Batts was imprisoned for 6 years following a drug arrest in 1964, during which James Burke took over his loan shark operations. Upon Batts's release, Burke and DeSimone murdered him, rather than relinquish control of the lucrative loan shark business, a brutal demonstration of Mafia codes and the lengths men went to protect their interests. The Lufthansa heist remains one of the most infamous crimes in U.S. history. 11 men, led by Henry Hill, James Burke, and Thomas DeSimone, stole nearly $6 million in cash and jewels from JFK Airport. The robbery's scale and audacity were unprecedented, and it highlighted the cold pragmatism of organized crime. Following the heist, a wave of murders eliminated anyone who might testify or claim a share of the money. The heist not only cemented the reputations of those involved, but also underscored the fragile, dangerous world of the Mafia, where power, loyalty, and betrayal were in constant tension. Goodfellas captures this world with unmatched authenticity, blending horror and humor to reveal the human faces behind the legends of organized crime. Goodfellas and the real-life events it depicts reveal the human side of the mob, not just the violence and crime, but the relationships, loyalties, and personalities that made organized crime both terrifying and fascinating. Scorsese's film portrays the glamour and allure of mafia life, while never shying away from the brutality. The story also critiques the American dream, showing how Hill and his associates pursued wealth, power, and respect through illegal means, mirroring the ambitions of ordinary Americans, but amplified by danger and moral compromise. The allure of the Mafia was not only financial, it was aspirational, offering young men a path to fame and influence otherwise denied to them. Yet the story also demonstrates the inevitable consequences of such a life: betrayal, imprisonment, and violent death. The cultural impact of Goodfellas has been enormous, shaping public perception of organized crime and influencing countless films and TV shows. The figures of Hill, Burke, DeSimone, and Vario became archetypes of the American gangster, not only as criminals but as symbols of ambition, excess, and the fragility of power.